There's so much that we're going to unpack this morning, specifically from our next two speakers, Michelle Sanchez and Dhatti Lewis.
So when I was asked by our illustrious conference organizers, hey, what have you been thinking about with regard to evangelism these days, post-COVID, post-George Floyd? An answer slowly began to form in my mind. What I have been thinking about is critical evangelism theory. Okay, so now here's how I would describe that theory. When we pursue diversity and dismantle racism in the name of Jesus Christ, we can inspire a spirit-empowered disciple-making movement. And I believe that we can see critical evangelism theory at work in the book of Acts. In those days when the number of disciples was increasing, the Hellenistic Jews among them complained against the Hebraic Jews because their widows were being overlooked in the daily distribution of food. But what we actually see here is one of the earliest depictions of systemic racism at work in the church. At the beginning of the passage, we see the church growing. The number of disciples is increasing. But then there's ethnic tension. The early church was full of the Spirit and led by godly leaders. They had developed a lovely church and a lovely program. They had still overlooked something. The impact of their well-intentioned program was inequity. Inequity between the Hellenistic Jews and the Hebraic Jews. Notice this too, that they probably would not have even noticed that there was inequity if the Hellenistic Jews didn't complain. So thankfully, they took action. They took action to dismantle the racism in their community. If you look at the people that were raised up to solve the problem, it was actually men from the marginalized group. But we're talking about critical evangelism theory.
Book of Acts, right? And in the book of Acts, what we see in Acts chapter, whether it's 6, Jesus always had a global vision, right? Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. So he always had a global vision. But success immediately just popped off in Jerusalem, right? Thousands and thousands of Christians were coming to know the Lord, of people who look like me, talk like me, act like me. But now, as diversity started entering into the church, you got to recognize that it wasn't until Acts chapter 6 and beyond, problems really started entering in from a cultural perspective. And now they had to start, because when everybody believed the same, or not necessarily believe the same thing, but when everybody put on wore the same things, had the same culture, things were good. But when you started allowing people from Judea and Samaria and to the ends of the earth, they started having to say, okay, what's core to our Christianity and what's cultural, right? Yeah. What's core to Christ and what's cultural? And so what happened was, and what we see intuitively take place in Acts chapter 6, is they started empowering leaders that were from the nations, or that culturally could be addressed, minority leadership, to help lead tables, right? Lead tables in order to do that. And I think that we're in a similar cultural moment, right? With the global South, with the rise of the minorities.